Hello, this is Professor Kim Nelson with the Jewelry Design Department at the Fashion Institute of Technology. This is going to be a tutorial on how to do a two-dimensional rendering using traditional painting techniques. We'll be rendering both metal and cabochon stone treatments. I may also get around to doing a little pave work. This tutorial is being put together for the course JD 134. Okay. This is going to be mainly a refresher of what was covered in class. Each one of these are a top view that corresponds to the front view directly below it, so it gives you an idea of the form I'll be rendering. I'll be going back and forth between white and yellow metal so that you get an example of how both are handled. To start by laying in a medium gray background. Keeping in mind that your light source is always coming in from the upper left. After blocking that in, going to go ahead and apply a dark diagonal along the lower right hand portion of this disc. Going to come in with a lighter area in the upper left hand corner. This is the basic setup for light and dark, depicting where the light source is coming from. Going to develop that a little farther. So I've done the medium, what I would call my moderate dark and my moderate light. Going to build back in some grays up in here. Going to bring in some core shadow or dark darks into here. And then, as I discussed in class, I'm going to do a little bit of bringing some of the dark treatments into the light side of the stone, light side of the disc, and some of the light treatments into the dark side. Like that. Going to apply a little bit of a shaded rim around the upper left portion of the disc. Going to bring in some reflected light. On the shadow side of the disc. And now I'm going to bring in some crisp highlight. When you're rendering white metal, You have to have some portion of the piece white. But when you're painting, achieving realism is really a matter of staging. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Vermeer's work, but Vermeer had a tremendous ability to capture light. Sorry, I undid. I know that's something you cannot do with your paintbrushes at home. I will try and exercise discipline and not do that. It's a habit once you get used to working digitally. I was discussing Vermeer. The way that he would get wonderful candlelight within a scene, for example, is he would set the rest of the room dark, and it was by comparison that the candlelight looked bright. The same thing is true with what we're doing. If you don't give yourself nice dark darks to go against, or good contrast, good staging, your metal won't seem shiny and bright. If you make the whole thing white, then it doesn't look particularly white, surprisingly enough. Okay, now I'm going to go to the next level. Here I had the hard corner, so it's a flat disc. This is a disc, but it's rounded slightly. Be doing this in yellow. And just like I did with the light metal, I will bring in some medium darks, and I will bring in some medium lights. Now the foundation color on this would have been the equivalent of your yellow ochre, and the tints would be a thin a slightly darker yellow ochre tinted or shaded down with burnt umber, and then the highlight would be or the medium light would be your taxi cab yellow color with a little bit of pro white in it. So I'm starting to get that feel of dark and light. Now I'm going to come into it bring in some real darks. Going to bring in some highlights, which would be your lemon yellow and pro white. And now I'm going to bring in some more detailed strokes. Once again, following that diagonal, roughly a 45-degree, although it doesn't need to be precise. With an emphasis on, once again, bringing it around. I need to bring some light over here into the dark areas. And some dark into the light areas. Okay? Don't overdo it. Don't go crazy. The overall effect is the upper left area should be lighter overall than the lower right. Upper left lighter, lower right darker. Now, since I have this happening, the next step is going to be to render that rounded edge. And the way I will do that is to come back in with my yellow ochre. Come back in with my medium tint. And essentially paint a ring, and that ring should be as wide as that rounded edge. You'll notice I had some of that medium tint here, so it makes a flat line, a flat, kind of flattened off area. That's fine. It will read just fine. The thing is to keep in your mind what it is you're trying to achieve. I come in with my medium dark. I'm going to come in with my medium light. Going to get more detailed with it. Bring in some dark darks. Bring in some highlights. Now I want to bring in a reflected light coming in around the edge here on the shadow side. I'm going to let a couple of spots of that go as high as the highlight. And now where I have some awkwardness, perhaps in the transitions, I will blend things a little bit. Your taxi cab yellow is a good color for this. And that gives you bringing in a reinforcing line here to create and reinforce that feeling of a sweep. That gives you this same thing, but now you can feel that the edge has been rounded off. Next, going back into the white metal, going to do a low dome. Come in with a medium gray. come in with a medium dark. Kind of a crescent. The lower the dome, the farther towards this side, the lower right hand corner, and the less in towards the center, that shadow is going to be. Coming in with the medium light. Going to get a bit of a yin-yang sort of shape here, or paisley, where you have a belly with a slight tail coming off of it, wrapping around. And you can already feel that dome starting to come together. Going to go with my dark core shadows. Remember, your core shadows stay closer to the light side than to the dark. So we will push that core shadow up and in. And highlight, once again, it's going to be right here from the front view. So it's going to be not toward the center, but up on the edge. And it will actually follow somewhat of a circular shape. Okay? So that gives me the basic form. Now, it's not very pretty. It has the basic information, but it's not very nice. So now I'm going to go in and add more information, more detail. Until I get a rendering that I'm happier with. And this detail will basically be bringing in some of the values, intermittent values, in between the dark darks and the light lights, the medium dark, medium light, medium that we've been using here, to basically sophisticate the rendering. Blend things out a little bit, break up some things. If I have a line like this that goes all the way, that can become hard to, it's not credible, it's not realistic. And it's also not interesting. So you would break that up. Need a little bit more core shadow in here, so I'll bring that in. Just like on the other portions, if I feel like I could use a little bit of darkness up in here, I'll add a little here. Maybe a little bit up in here, just to have a little more going on. And then I have a reflected light. I need to stop before I go too far, because if I don't, I will get caught up in doing unnecessary detail and making your renderings too busy. And it's common for students. They put too much information in, and it actually starts to, instead of creating and enforcing the form, it tends to break it up and make it less believable. A little kind of reflected highlight off on that side. Okay, there. And lastly, for the circular forms, I'll be doing a high dome. This could also be a half sphere, or it could be a full sphere. From what we're going to see, the rendering would be the same. I will do this in yellow gold. say in the medium yellow. Going to come in, bring in the medium dark. And because this is a high dome, I'm going to let the shadow area fill much more in toward the center than I did on the low dome. Come in with the medium light. And once again, it's going to be that somewhat yin-yang shape or paisley shape. Okay. I'm going to come in with my core shadows. They will, as before, be closer to the lighter edge of the shadow, closer to the highlight side of the shadow than the shaded side of the shadow. Basically a crescent within a crescent. I'm going to come in with my highlights, which in this case will be down towards the center now, and they will be round. And that's essentially the form. Now I just need to make it attractive. I've captured my form. Now I need to add more information, make it more appealing. So I will start using some of those intermediate values, colors. In yellow gold, I find a nice one to be a little bit of the taxi cab yellow, a little bit of lemon yellow, and pro white to get you a nice high value, not too dark, but not highlight yet color. And that's very useful for doing a reflected light. And on a dome or a sphere, you'll actually carry some reflected light all the way around. Okay. Need to bring some light into the dark, some dark into the light. Bounce things around a little bit. This is that dangerous stage of adding detail. You don't want to overdo it, but you need, depending on the size of the area you're filling, you can't have it just be dead space. You have to have things going on. So, apologize for the unfair undo. Going to allow for a nice highlight range reflected light both in the lower right hand corner and the upper left, because the light just tends to dance around a full dome. That's not bad. I'm finding it a little dark and heavy through here. So if I'm working in gouache, I will blend that with a little lighter color on a barely damp brush. Computer, we have other methods, but the methods basically do the same thing. It's like a slight wash of color to lighten it up if it's too dark in some areas. Okay. Works for me. Yeah, I'm not loving it, I'll be honest with you. And the full dome is technically the easiest of the ones to do. But this is live, guys, so sometimes it fights back. Okay, I'm calling that fine. Okay, now the next one is going to be a disc with a hollowed out basin. Out of respect for time, I'm going to actually copy the rendering from the first disc and just bring it over. So there's the disc portion. To paint the center, I'm going to go back to a middle gray. Paint that in. And now, since this is a basin, instead of being a dome, it's a basin, the lighting reverses. The light's coming from here, it's hitting this edge, and this is being cast into shadow. So, I'll take my medium dark. And have a crescent of that following along that edge. I will have my medium light doing once again a somewhat of a paisley-ish form. Not going to bring it all the way to the edge. Like so. Going to take my core shadow once again, not going to bring that up into the edge either. Okay, and I'm going to do my highlight, which will be right in there. Okay, I want to add some detail. doing the same idea of bringing some light into the dark and some dark into the light. Okay, I'm going to put in a dim highlight, a spherical highlight, but it'll be dimmer. It won't be bright white. I'm going to put that in here to kind of break up that core shadow a little. Do another white one over in this area. And that's good enough to indicate the form. Now it's interesting. If I flip that over, you can see it's basically a dome. So now I need to put a small highlight right along the edge of this, because the light's going to come in here and it's going to smack right against that edge. And that's an important thing to do to get that feeling of the basin coming up and then becoming like a crisp, flat disc. Can break it up, a couple of smaller dots, and then find it again. There, that's fine. Okay, so that would be complete. Okay, so there are the round forms. Disc, rounded disc, low dome, full dome, flat, and basin. Okay, now I'm going to do cylindrical forms. That will be the next stage of the tutorial, but I'm going to take a break here, and we'll continue the tutorial beginning with the cylindrical forms.